Okay, we can maybe. Okay, so we are live. I hope everybody see us. Here from Palermo, from Palazzo Sant'Elia. I'm trying to see if it's happening for real. Yes. It's happening for real. Perfect. So welcome everybody, wherever you are, and I'm happy that we are all here together. And I have an echo, so I don't know how to cancel this echo. I hear myself. Maybe I should just turn it off like that. Okay, so thank you, Fondazione Sant'Elia, for allowing this second event of the public program of the show ESSE, the show that I created dedicated to Sicily and more than Sicily, that opened nearly 2 weeks ago. The show is dealing with light pollution mainly. It's a collection of pieces that been shown before in other museums, some private collections, and most of the show are new pieces that never been shown before, and others are pieces that I did especially for this show, ESSE. And the public program is always dealing with the main topic of the exhibition, light pollution. And each week we're gonna have an event. We already had the first event last week with an art historian from Palermo, Giussi Diana. And now we are happy to host ThanksForNothing, and thank you, ThanksForNothing. And Marine is here with us, one of the co-founders of the beautiful nonprofit from Paris. And ThanksForNothing invited a few participants for this talk, and they will introduce it just in a minute. And would like to invite everybody to Palermo. The show is amazing, and the cause, the topic is very important for me, and I guess for each one of us that's living on the planet and care about the future. And this light pollution issue is growing and needs to be stopped. And I discovered light pollution through my work a few years ago by looking for dark places to work, as darkness is my canvas. And I won't speak much about my work because this is not the right moment. The moment now is to give the microphone to Marine, and she will introduce the rest. Thank you very much, all of you, Brigitte, Léa, and Caroline, and of course Gael and Marine, and all yours.
Okay, thank you so much, Rafael. We are very happy to be here tonight for this conference and this talk that will combine artists and sciences, which is something that is very important to us to create this bridge. And obviously, the exhibition ESSE by Rafael at the Fondazione Sant'Elia discusses and addresses this topic. So we wanted to be part of this online conversation program that will go till the end of the exhibition. So we're very happy to be part of the first panels here. And so as an introduction, I am Marine Wenchenbeck. I am the General Director and co-founder of the association ThanksForNothing. So I will briefly present the organization, so people in Palermo and people joining us tonight will be able to learn more about who we are. So this is an organization we created in 2017, so it's been 5 years that we decided to connect cultural programs with social commitment. We are a collective of women working in the art field for 15 years now. And at some point, we were all volunteers or activists into social organization, sometimes working on the refugee crisis, on education, environmental issues, and so on. And we decided that our career could be linked to our personal commitment. So this is why we decided to create this organization, ThanksForNothing. Just a few words about the title. That is, always and all the projects we do are connected to the voice of an artist. And so this title, ThanksForNothing, is a direct connection to a poem by a wonderful artist that we love that is called John Giorno. And this is also why tonight we decided to have Caroline Corbasso, who is the artist participating into this panel, to name the panel. It is very important to us to address the voices of the artists and to have them very present into our project. So just to come back on ThanksForNothing for a minute. So it's been 5 years that we've been organizing symposium, and we have one actually coming on May the 13th in Paris at the Louvre Museum, and the symposium will address the relationship between art and social commitment. And so we did that for 5 years at the Louvre Museum. We did 2 Nuit Blanche edition throughout the street of Paris. We did project and workshops with school children and NGOs and so on. We raised more than 2.5 million euros for the refugee crisis in the beginning of our organization. And we are now working on an important project that will be a new art center opening in Paris in 2025, having half of the spaces dedicated to a cultural program and half of the spaces dedicated to NGOs working on a daily basis with us. So this is why it is very interesting for us to address environmental issues tonight. Like I said, we gathered Caroline Corbasso, who's a French artist who titled the symposium and the panel tonight. And we also have Brigitte Zand and Léa Marito from the Muséum d'Histoire Naturelle in Paris, who are specialists on light pollution, and they will share their knowledge with us. And I think this is it for me. And so now I will share the presentation and give the mic, like you said, Rafael, to Gaëlle Porte. And before I do that, I want to thank you, Rafael, again very much. We're very happy to be part of the program, and we thank the Fondation Sant'Elia as well. So Gaëlle, it's all yours now. Thanks.
Thank you, Marine. I'm Director of Projects at ThanksForNothing. And thank you again, Rafael, for the kind invitation. We're really happy to be able to take part in this programming. And we hope to see your exhibition in person very soon in Palermo. Until then, I wanted to introduce with a little more details Caroline Corbasso. Caroline, you work with drawing, film, and sculpture, and you explore space through your artworks and the way we perceive it as human and often the rupture between humans and the astronomical tools that have been developed in the last few years. You've attended the St. Martin School, and you've graduated from ENSPA with honors. Your work has been shown in many international institutions, in Seoul and in the UK, of course, in France, at the FRAC, Provence Côte d'Azur in Marseille, for example. You benefited from the support of the CNRS and the Laboratoire d'Astrophysique of Marseille for 2 of your films. And you recently won the great Monde Nouveau grant, which is financing your latest film. And the film is, you're shooting it at Du Pic du Midi, which is the Star Reserve in France. And we're very happy to have you among us. And it'll be interesting to see how you perceive the subject on a more sensitive, in a more sensitive way, an artistic way. Brigitte Zand, thank you for accepting. I know you are very busy at the Museum of Natural History and with all the lecturing you do. So you're a French astrophysicist and cosmochemist. Among many other specialties, I read that you had quite a few. You're a lecturer at the National History Museum and at the Institute of Mineralogy. And you see yourself as a teacher and researcher, and you specialize in primitive meteorites. As you say, you like to observe big rocks coming down onto Earth from the sky. And we enjoy the way you perceive your discipline with a lot of humor, it seems. And you also co-direct Fripon, which is an observation network. And I think that's how you met with Caroline Corbasso, because she likes to draw those big rocks. And you've been wanting to collaborate on projects for quite a while. So we're happy to finally have you two discuss the matter for the public today. And you invited Léa Marito, who is a PhD candidate, with you, because Léa Marito is actually specialized and is studying the effects of light pollution on biodiversity. And Léa unfortunately has COVID. She's very ill. She just rolled out of bed to join us. So we are so grateful. We'll try not to bombard you with too many questions, but thank you very much for joining us. We know you're not feeling great. And now, if we can maybe open up the conversation, we'd love to ask you, Caroline, about the title for the roundtable today that you chose, and maybe you can explain the work around it, and also the artwork that is in the back here, and that we used for communication that's illustrating this talk.
Sure, thank you, Gaëlle, for this introduction. So the title is Ici, la nuit existe encore. Here, the night still exists. And it's true that we have to realize how night has become a rare phenomena. And we don't have access to the night sky very often nowadays. And I was really struck the first time I was in a desert when I saw how many stars there were in the sky. So the night only exists in a few places in the world today, and we are deprived of the night most of the time. So it's a subtitle which is in my film Atacama Desert, where I shot a film a few years ago. And I can show you a small extract of the film if I manage to share my screen. So please tell me if this works.
Voici l'endroit le plus aride du monde, le plus limpide, le plus immobile du monde. Cette terre est faite du souvenir des hommes, de leurs messages, de leurs os réduits en poudre.
It's creating suspense.
Yeah. Sorry.
Ici, la nuit existe encore. On cherche dans le cosmos la poussière des origines.
Voilà. This was the short extract from my film Atacama. Arrêtez le partage. Okay. So yeah, I've been searching for these preserved places in my work and like naturally very drawn to them. My next film is going to be shot at the Pic du Midi, which is also a dark sky preserve. And I guess I'm very attracted to these places where we can still see the night sky. Now I will share just a few images of recent drawings. Okay. Directly inspired by Brigitte's work. So here we can see images made by this sky surveillance network called Fripon, which is so like 100 skyward looking cameras that track celestial events on the left, and my drawing is on the right. I was immediately fascinated by these images and these cameras because usually surveillance cameras are not faced toward the sky. And what also struck me is how we perceive the cities all around, like so all the light that we see in the circle is actually light produced by cities, so light pollution basically. And so not only has light pollution invaded our landscapes, depriving us from the sky, but it has also invaded source scientific images. And as I use these scientific images in my work, these images are affected by this pollution. And so my drawings are directly also affected by this light pollution. We can see here another image, which is also an image made by a sky surveillance camera and of a meteor shower. And all the light that we see around is light produced by cities. So I found interesting not to erase this light pollution, but rather leave it there, and so that the viewer can question what he's looking at. So, okay.
Thank you,
Voilà.
Caroline. Thank you very much. Maybe Léa, or if you feel up for it, but otherwise, Brigitte, could you tell us more about technically what light pollution is?
Yeah, I can try to talk. I hope you hear me well. Basically, light pollution might be defined as just the light that is not here naturally in the landscape. It is all the light coming from our public lighting, car headlights, storefronts, and today it's omnipresent. 99% of the European population live under light polluted skies. I don't know if Brigitte wants to add something, or...
Yes, I want to add the fact that man wants to live in the night, and that's why man created light pollution, basically. We want to extend our day. And we have eyes that are not made for night at all, contrary to some animals. So we need to produce light so that we can continue to function at night. And that's very disturbing for animals who can see in the night. So that's a very, very intense light, and it really perturbs their cycle. So it's really related to the fact that we want to live longer, basically have longer days.
And maybe I can jump into the conversation. Do you want me to share the images that you send us, Brigitte? I'm going to try to do that.
That would be really good if you could show the first 3, Los Angeles changing with time. I think it's very evocative with what light pollution is. There are images made by University of California, Los Angeles about light pollution, UCLA.
Yeah, this is it. Do you see it?
Yeah, that's the first one. That's Los Angeles in 1908. Then if you can show us the second one, 50 years later, 1958. Now we're not seeing the whole thing here.
Marine, can you scroll down a tiny bit?
Yes, I did it. It doesn't work.
Okay, now it works. Okay. So that's Los Angeles 1958. And if you can show us 2008, it's really striking, the difference. Okay, so now it's really Los Angeles. It's always seen from the same place, and it's really a sea of light. And you can see that the sky isn't even dark at all anymore. It's kind of yellowish, and you can understand how perturbing it would be for us, because we do need the dark, and for the animals who are trying to find their way in the dark using the moon or using some small signal. It's just a sea of light, basically. Thank you, Marine. I think it really explains what pollution is and how it increased over the years.
And speaking about this increase over the years, can you tell us, since then, scientists like you and like Léa have been working on light pollution and the consequences it has on biodiversity and also human beings?
Léa, do you want to start?
Yeah, I can try. So at the beginning, it was more the astronomers that were aware of this light pollution. And it is since, I would say, maybe a little bit more than 1 decade that scientific highlighted that biodiversity was also impacted by this light pollution. What is striking is that all taxa are impacted, not only nocturnal species, such as bats, but also diurnal ones, such as birds. And what is important to note is that light is organizing our ecosystem through the day, the alternance between day and nights, through the months with the moon that change, full moon, etc., and through the year because the night is longer or shorter. And all this change in light regions organize our animals organize their life through the year, the reproduction. It also helps them sometimes to orient them through space. And so this intrusion of artificial lights into ecosystems will create a lot of, how would I say that, of blurred signals to these animals and change how they interact with each other.
I would add that all the nocturnal animals, they have eyes that are adapted to very low light. So that bright light is really a problem for them. And one of the problems also they have is that they need to hunt without being seen. And when they want to hunt in bright light, they can't do it because the risk is becoming a prey themselves. So that is making their life difficult. Also, there are a lot of their functions that are affected. Léa mentioned some. In fact, for example, turtles, when they lay their eggs, the small turtles, when they come out, they're going to go towards the light that shimmers on the sea. So they're going to go towards the sea. And if there is light on the beach, behind them, they're going to go towards the town instead of going towards the sea. So it's a total disruption of their function. And many animals, many of their individual functions are affected that way. And we are far from knowing all of the effects of light pollution, but we do know it's a big stress on most of the animals.
Léa, I think you specialize particularly on bats. Can you describe maybe specifically how it affects them and how you collect data on a daily basis?
Yeah, so I could talk about it during 3 hours, so I would try to sum it up. Bats show different responses to light pollution according to their foraging strategies. I think that's all of you have already seen during summer nights, all the insects that aggregate near streetlights. And so some bats that are, I would say, little, that fly rapidly, will tend to forage near the streetlights to exploit those insects that they can prey. But on the contrary, there are slower bats that will avoid lights because of the intrinsic perception of increased predation risk. And so it will disrupt how their spatial distribution through a landscape. And eventually it will also impact their temporal activity. This is what I'm working on. And to study this, we use what we call bat boxes. So those are little boxes that record the ultrasounds that bats use while flying in the landscapes. And those sounds are then analyzed through software. So during my work, I use those boxes, but I also use data that come from a citizen science program that encourage volunteers to do so. And it allowed me to work on the impact of light pollution on bats at national scale. So I'm very grateful for that.
It's interesting that you're bringing up that citizens have helped you collect the data. And Brigitte, when we had first started discussing the roundtable, you brought up also that it was amateur astronomers that had first started noticing the light pollution effects, and that all these the citizens, everyone can really contribute and help with the research. When can we just go back, and when do you think we really started seeing the impact of the light pollution on different species, on us?
I think it's been coming on gradually, and as Léa pointed out, first the astronomers were sensitive to it. For example, if you come to Paris, the observatoire was built on a little hill that was on the outskirts of the city, and there was no problem. The city was north, and most of the things that the astronomers want to look at are towards the south. So they were not disturbed very much at first by Paris being in the north. And then gradually, the town invaded and started surrounding the observatory, and there started to be light, and it was less easy to do observations. It's still good if you want to look at very close objects like planets, because there's not too much turbulence above the observatory because it's still on a hill, and the building itself is still very high. But you couldn't look at faint objects. You have to go somewhere else. And the astronomers started going to the south of France, and then in different countries like Chile, where Caroline went, because the night skies are so much purer, both in terms of dryness and in terms of altitude, and also in terms of light pollution. But I think we have not been talking about light pollution and its effect on astronomy for that long, maybe 20, 30 years, I would say. Maybe you will correct me, Léa, on that. And on its effect on life, on our lives, on our biology, and on animal biology, I think it's even more recent. I think it's something that really people started realizing only rather recently, I should think. But it has many effects on our health. And we're talking on how animal functions are perturbed, but we're not talking even of their health. And it's pretty obvious if it has impact on our health, it should have effects on their health as well. But we're far from talking about that yet.
And maybe I'm sure, Brigitte, since Léa explained her researches and Caroline made a short introduction about your collaboration together, would you be able to explain to us precisely how you work and how you've been specialized in like Gail said, big rocks coming to us? Can you explain how you work, because it is absolutely fascinating for people who don't know anything about that.
That's not directly related to light pollution. I work on meteorites, which are rocks that come from the outer space, in fact, from the inner solar system, basically. And when these rocks hit the atmosphere, they arrive at really, really, really high speed, and they compress the air so much, and the air doesn't have time to escape. So that means it's heated very, very violently, and it loses its electrons, becomes a plasma, which is hotter than the surface of the sun. So it's 10,000 degrees, basically. So it shines. It really shines like a plasma. And so any stone that comes into the atmosphere is going to make a shooting star if it's a very, very small stone, because the plasma is going to gradually shrink the stone on itself and destroy it if it's very tiny. And if it's a big, big rock, well, it's going to shrink, but some of it is still going to reach the ground. And that way, we've got samples that we find on the ground, which are called meteorites. And they're samples from small planets for most of them, but we also have bits of the moon and bits of Mars. So my job is to study those rocks and, look at them from the outside and then saw them, polish them, look at them in a microscope and do analysis of them and try to understand what's happening inside planets, small planets that have not evolved very much since the beginning of the solar system, and planets that have evolved much like the Earth and that have what we call differentiated. That means they've got a core now, a crust, a basaltic crust, and a residual mantle. And inside the Earth, we will never go because it's so hot, so much pressure, so it's difficult, it's solid. But meteorites that come from smaller planets which have broken up are going to tell us what the inside of the Earth might look like. At least they're going to give us some form of information. So we study all those rocks as probe of outer space, what are other bodies made of, what's the Earth interior, and also how were the planets made. And because we find those rocks we don't find those rocks as readily as we used to in the 19th century, because people don't see them fall anymore. People don't live outside. They don't see the rocks when they're on the ground. We've set up this network of camera, which Caroline alluded to watch the skies and to watch the fireballs that signal the arrival of a meteorite. And once we've seen a fireball with several cameras, we reconstruct its trajectory and we can decide where it came from, which body it came from, but also we can try to decide where it's fallen, if it has fallen, if something has fallen, and then we can try to go and look for it. In the past, it was always citizens who found rocks because they just went in the country and they just saw rocks on the ground, new rocks, and eventually they gave it to the pharmacist, to the teacher, to the priest, and those rocks came to the museum, and we knew that they'd fallen. Nowadays, things don't function anymore like that, and we still need people to find rocks on the ground, because if you know something the size of an orange or a clementine has fallen in 10 square kilometers, you're not going to go and search like that. It has to be found by people pretty much the same way as it used to be. So we've designed this citizen science program to get people to help us find rocks on the ground, and we haven't found any in France yet, but people who've been working with us and using our methods found one in Italy, in one in England, and recently one in Austria. So we're just waiting to find our first rocks in France. For that kind of work, we're not very much impacted by light pollution, because what we do is watch the sky. So, and we want really, really, really bright fireballs. So these show even in daylight. So this isn't really an issue, but we do watch the sky all the time, and we still think it's not a good idea. And we work with astronomers, obviously, and we still think it's not a good idea. And we work with biologists. So we still think it's not a good idea to have light pollution. This is how I got involved into these issues of light pollution and started working with Léa.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Maybe I do have like a small question regarding the collection of rocks at the Muséum National d'Histoire Naturelle. Can you tell us how many rocks did you collect, and maybe their origin, like you said, maybe like an example that you had, and that could be interesting in terms of analyzing the phenomena of the planets it comes from. It really is a personal question. Like I'm really like interested in this.
That's okay. We've got about 1,500 different types of meteorites, or perhaps up to 2,000 at the museum, and we've got several thousand samples, because sometimes we've got several samples on the same meteorite. Sometimes many, sometimes just one. But on average, I think we've got about 4,000 rocks, and the collection at the museum is historical, in the sense that the first rock, and I think it's number 1, fell in Ensisheim in Alsace in 1492, and it's the first rock that's known that is reported to be fallen in Europe and collected. It was long the oldest one we knew in the whole world, but now there's one in Japan which is older. Fell in 700 something in Japan in a monastery, and was kept in a box with a drawing of its fall, so we know it was a fall from back then. But so the collection at the museum did not, I mean, we have this rock for 1492, but it didn't start then. It's only in the late 19th century that people started knowing that meteorites fell from the sky, and that they were scientific precious samples, rare and precious samples. So they've really started collecting them actively since the early 1800s, basically. So the collection at the museum is historical, and most of the big collections in the world. There's a big one at the British Museum, a big one in the US at the Smithsonian Institution. There's one in Vienna. They're all historical, basically. And when the collection is historic, then you've got lots of main masses of rocks, because at the time people collected really, really big chunks of rocks. Coming to samples, we've got a variety of samples, and some of them really tell us about the early times of the solar system. There's one which is called Orgueil, and because they wear the name of the place where they've fallen. Orgueil happens to mean pride in English, and it's one of the jewels of our collection, because Orgueil, if you could take the sun and remove all the hydrogen and helium, which is most of the mass of the sun, but all the rest is exactly the same composition as Orgueil. And what does it tell us? It tells us that when the sun formed from a cloud of gas and dust, the rocks, I mean, the little solid bodies that formed at the same time, which did not keep the hydrogen and helium, had exactly the same composition. So with Orgueil, we have a sample which is sort of the standard of the composition of the bulk solar system, the material from which the solar system was made. So that's a really precious sample, and it's a very, very fragile sample. So those rocks probably fall fairly often through the atmosphere, but they don't make it to the ground, because they just break down in very, very small pieces, and nothing is left on the ground. And Orgueil is the biggest one of that kind, and there's only 6 of them known in the world, basically. Some of them is just 1 gram, and Orgueil is the biggest one we have. So it's sort of the standard. And when people want to study some rock processes, they need a standard, like you know, you have the meter standard. Well, they ask us for a sample of that, and we allocate. We have a group that looks at the request for people who want to work on it, and we allocate a small sample that they can use as a standard to compare that to what they do. So Orgueil is one of our really precious samples. Other precious samples we have, about 10 years ago, we were given a sample that was found in Sahara, so it's not an observed fall, and it probably was altered a little bit while it remained in the desert, because there's still water in the desert. But that rock is the first sample we have from the southern part of Mars, where there are the oldest terrains. And inside that rock, we find bits of rocks that are older than any rock we know on Earth. So we've got a view of Mars the way it was for over 4.4 billion years ago, very shortly after it was formed. And at the time, it is thought that Mars and the Earth were probably not that different. And that's when life started on Earth, basically. So what we can't see on Earth, we hope to see on Mars. And I have another student who started at the same time as Léa, who's working on that rock and is finding really, really fascinating things.
Thanks,
Well,
Brigitte.
thank you.
Caroline, I had a question for you, because obviously you during your research and your projects and you go to these observatories, your star observatories, and so you're in close proximity with a lot of scientists, and I wondered how it affected your artwork and your practice as an artist.
To meet scientists?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whether you're a bit more scientific than some other artists.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've always been very intrigued by scientific working places, and I think it's a challenge, a way of challenging myself too, because I don't have any scientific background. I'm just really drawn to science, and what I love is having conversations with scientists and not always getting all of it, but interpreting what I understand and the poetry that can come out of this. So there's always this kind of zone of me understanding part of it and then making work out of this.
Do you try to have, when you depict a night sky, and do you try to have it as accurate as possible to the image or the real sky you're observing?
I always, when I use images, I tend to go to the, take all the le superflu, how would I say this? I go to the essence of it, so I usually take the colors out and go back to something really minimalistic. And I like that these images tell a story, and I try to always question the viewer with the idea of scale, like at what scale are we? Is this a microscopic image? Is this an image of the universe? And I try to, when you take a scientific image out of its context, it tells another story, I guess. So that's what I like, is taking things out of their context.
Thank you. And can you tell us a bit more about your current film that you're shooting?
For instance, I was just thinking of something, is that the images of Fripon, so the ones that Brigitte works on. For me, when I saw them, what I really liked is that they also look like images from biology. Comment on dit fécondation in English?
Yes, I think it's the same word, fecundation, I should think.
Fecundation, maybe, yeah. They remind me of images of very like anatomic images. So I like this twist. And to go back to my film, Gaëlle, you were asking, sorry?
Yes, the film you're doing, that you're shooting right now, well, that you're preparing to shoot, at the Pic du Midi within for the Monde Nouveau grant. If you can tell us more about it and the location.
It's located in the Pyrenees in a réserve de ciel étoilé, so dark sky preserve, at the top of a mountain. And that's the first time I actually saw the Milky Way. And I felt like I had been tricked, like, okay, so this is the sky. Why haven't I seen this before? Where are these stars the rest of the time? And it was a real shock, actually. And so the film I'm writing is about a link between botanique and astrophysics. So a link between plants, because plants are very rare on this mountain because it's a high altitude. So there's a difficulty for life to exist on this mountain. And there's also this link with the sky. I find there are some interesting links between plants and stars. At the moment, I'm really inspired by that. And that's also quite present in your work, Rafael.
Yes, I was in mute.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. I want to throw like a bomb to the conversation. This is an article. I was trying to, I don't know if you see. Here we go. You see? In the Time magazine?
China plans to launch
yeah,
an artificial moon to light up the night skies.
Yeah, so this is the beginning of the end of the conversation, because I see Brigitte moving ahead almost. Yeah, that's we also want to speak about the future, and reading this kind of articles, which just published not so long ago with the Time magazine. Online, you can all search for it and go deeper. Put our work, whether work in art and environmental, with the environmental connection, puts it much more important than maybe before, and we want to understand if somebody hears what we are trying to say, and what can be done in light pollution. What I mean, we cannot stop life. Where cities, need to continue to function. Of course, light pollution created by cities. If you go in the middle of the ocean, you won't find light pollution. It is true, as Caroline mentioned, and I'm sorry for Caroline that she discovered the Milky Way so late. I'm happy you discovered it, but this is like, as my show starts, I mean, the words on the wall here starts, it's that 2/3 of the people will never see in their entire life the Milky Way. Super sad fact. And of course, Europe is not in a good place, and the entire world is a bit like, well, 83% of people on Earth, which basically lives on urban centers. People are not living too far from that. So 83% of the people on Earth living under polluted sky. So what can be done to continue life and respect that problem? We know what we do with plastic that contaminating the ocean and other places. We know what we can do with air. How our behavior should be changed to adapt and respect these problems to improve our life quality and a bit stop that decadence that we are living at. So what can be done with light pollution? I mean, I think Yeah.
Rafael, if I can jump in, Brigitte had the perfect solution, because light pollution, contrarily to the air quality, is fixable very easily. Brigitte, do you wanna give your solution?
Yes, one of the things I want to react to what Caroline said and Rafael said about the Milky Way. When there was a light breakdown, electricity breakdown in Los Angeles some years ago, people called the police because there was a menacing veil in the sky. They didn't know it was the Milky
Yeah, I've
Way.
heard that.
So I just wanted to tell that story. Yes, what you said, Gail, is absolutely right. The good thing about light pollution is it can be fixed. You just turn off your lights and there's no remnants. It's not like plastic in the ocean, for example. It's much easier to fix. And also, light costs energy, and that costs money. So many more towns now are at least turning off their lights in the middle of the night from, let's say, midnight to 5 o'clock. It is not sufficient. It's not sufficient in the sense that most of the animals that live at night, that live in the early night, and they live at the end of the night. So the middle of the night isn't the best time for them, but at least it's some progress. And many things can be done. Certainly being more sober in the way we use it, that would be really something really important. And at the time where energy costs so much, lighting the night sky just doesn't make sense at all. Also, more and more, there are things that are being tried, which is called light on demand. That is, if you circulate somewhere where it's dark, well, the light comes on just when you're circulating. Of course, it's difficult because an animal would trigger the light as just the same way as you would, so that isn't that easy. And also, simply just dimming the lights. You don't need a lot of light. And I must say that one of the things that people found recently to lower the light was using LED lamps, and that is a problem because LED don't cost a lot in terms of energy, but they're still very bright, so people tend to use them very much because it doesn't cost as much money, and that's bad. Clearly we want less light. And also the LEDs emit in the blue, especially if you want cheap LEDs, they emit in the blue a lot, and that seems to be the wavelength that's the worst for life. Probably all wavelengths are bad, and some animals are more sensitive to certain wavelengths than others. But the way to go would be really to dim the lights as much as possible and only use them when we really need them. That would be a major progress already.
Mm-hmm. And maybe I have a question for Léa, because Brigitte was mentioning that some lights and the time of the night where the light is on impacts the species. Is it the case for the bats that you're studying?
Yes, totally. In France, there are almost a little more than 30 species of bats. But they are all insectivorous bats, so they feed on insects that live at night. And those insects are active just after sunset and before sunrise. So all the bats I'm studying are basically very active just after sunset and before sunrise. And as Brigitte said, it is very good to do some part night extinction at the heart of the night. But it would be even more efficient for the species I studied to do it earlier. Of course, there are a lot of other things to take into account, because this is the hour when we want to go at the restaurants, we want to walk, etc. So it's not that easy. But also, as we said, we lost this connection with the sky, with the Milky Way. And I don't think that diminishing lights would be degrading our life quality. It would be an improvement in some cases, I think.
Yes, absolutely. And since we had the scientific response from Brigitte and Léa, maybe we can have the artistic response from Caroline, because I think, like you said it first, I mean, your approach is not to be accurate 100% on a scientific context, but to give a poetic reason and interpretation of the researches by scientific like Brigitte and Léa. So what would be your response to produce works and share images the way you do? So maybe you can pursue the explanation about the film at the Pic du Midi, because it seems really important that artists also shows and share these images in a poetic way.
Well, it's true that art is a way of raising awareness on many subjects, for sure. I guess at our very tiny scale, we can participate in maybe revealing nature's beauty and making people want to preserve it more. But I mean, sometimes it's quite discouraging when we feel like there is so much to do, of course. But I guess, yes, we can all act at our level. And I think the art scene today is really, I can perceive a movement of artists, a family of artists who are extremely engaged in these matters and who are working to raise awareness about the climate. And I want to participate in this for sure.
Mm-hmm. And do you want to tell us more about the project you're filming and,
Mm-hmm.
and how you're going to shoot and how you contacted the Pic du Midi for this project?
Yeah, it's at an early stage at the moment, but I'm writing the story. So it's the story of the climbing of this mountain, and it takes 4 hours to climb this mountain. And during this journey, the main character will go through some different stages, and like the character will meet people. Some things will happen during these 4 hours to the top. Of course, the movie will not last 4 hours, but it will be like a kind of an intimate journey. And at the top, a reunion with the stars. And a kind of liberation, actually. So it's also inspired by the myth of Sisyphe, which is carrying a weight. So the character is carrying a very heavy weight on his shoulders, and then the more he climbs the mountain, the more he manages to get rid of this weight by actually planting some seeds. And so it's very metaphorical. And I've been in contact with the Pic du Midi because I've been there a few years ago, and I was lucky enough to stay for a few days, and so I was able to spend a few nights. Which is quite interesting there is you live during the night and then you sleep during the day. So everything is backwards, and I was really inspired, and I finally get a chance to make a project with the Pic du Midi. Thanks to
that sounds very familiar to me. Work by night, sleep in the day. I do also, the way I work, I also step in the location where I work. And when it's already night, I never go to see it before, and I leave it when it's still night. So I discover the places I've been only in the artwork. All these places, like for me, and I guess for the rest, there's a new dimension, different dimension of what we know. It's not a day and it's not a night; it's a suspended moment, and the night for me is something that essential for continuing my work. I'm doing it for a long time, always working with the invisible and with light as the main subject, and there's always more difficulty to find light polluted free places, and the locations are always less. And well, the challenge is, of course, to reduce light pollution using the energy in the right way, changing the light temperature, the light color that the cities are using, and of course it has to do with political decisions and investment to change all the systems we have now that illuminating the streets, and advertising, which no one see in the middle of the night, and still lighting those big advertisings and so on. And yeah, that brings me also to a bit wrap this beautiful meeting and panel by mentioning a few of the next things that are coming in the program of my show, the public program. And well, the next talk next week is with Aleph Molinari, which is the co-editor of Purple Magazine, and with Anfisa Rubble, which is from Art Observer, the editor at large of Art Observer. But what's interesting in connection of this talk is the power of art to make change and speak about environmental issues. And I see it here time to time. I'm spending time now in Palermo. I'm receiving kids and schools and students from the art academy, and I see their interest, and it's important also to share this, care with younger generations that will then maybe teach the older generation, the parents and grandparents, how to do it right. Normally it's the other way around. Here, I think the very young, under 20, has a lot of influence on the older people, which grew up in this new industrial times where everything was amazing, and looks like plastic was amazing, and light was amazing, and everything was amazing. And then the overuse becoming something that they maybe finding hard to change, and through the young generations and engagement of art and young generation, things can move. And that brings me to the talk that we're going to have on 14th of May with Studio Drift from Amsterdam. Studio Drift, I guess a lot of people know, are working a lot with light, and the topic of that talk is the impact that art can do on environmental issues, the connected between art design and environment. That would be on the 14th of May, and yeah, right after, as I work with deliberate blindness, I don't see what I do, and then the result is a new reality. I won't read the entire program. Who interested to look at the program can go on the website of the Fondazione Sant'Elia and other social media and so on. I will just mention what's going to happen here on the 20th of May. So 20th of May, I invited Yakir Arbib, which is an amazing pianist, born in Rome and living in Paris at the moment. And he graduated Berkeley, and recently had a show at Musée de la Radio in Paris, and some other great jazz clubs. Is doing between classic and jazz, and composer, and he's composing something for the show. And he will play on Friday, 20th of May. And what's special about Yakir, beside all this talent, is that Yakir is blind and he's creating music and playing amazingly with this, I would say, using this limit as an advantage. And the rest of the talks you can all look online. And well, I hope everybody can come to visit Palermo, which is a beautiful city, and the show is part of an amazing program that this city is providing. Today, William Kentridge came, and I met him earlier today, and that's an amazing place to visit. And I hope you're going to see the show and discover my work in one point here in Palermo, and looking to a better future, environmentally wise. And yeah, what else I can say? Thank you, everybody.
And welcome to the non-human.
Welcome to the non-human. Absolutely. And I hope to meet you back in Paris when I'm back to Paris, because I'm based in Paris. And I hope to make a physical reunion and speak about more things, and get to see the meteors in the museum, and to see your work, Caroline, in person. And yes, Gael, Marine, Brigitte, Léa, Caroline, thank you so much for
thank you for your inspiring work.
You can.
Thank you so much for bringing us all together with Kat. You know, like the conversation was so interesting that my cat was like, I need to be part of it.
I've actually almost had to say thank you, but I didn't know the name of the cat.
Her name is Lula, like in the
Lula.
Sailor and Lula film by David Lynch.
Perfect.
And she loves the conversation. Every time she loves it. Well, thank you so much for this inspiring talk, and thank you so much, Rafael, for gathering us around light and pollution issues. And thank you very much, because we learned so much from the scientific part and from the art part as well. So we were very happy to be part of it.
And thank you. Thanks for nothing. Always amazing program. I'm following the program fanatically. And it's amazing that you took this invitation, and here we are talking about important things that will make change.
Turn off the switch, everyone. Bye.
Buonanotte da Palermo. Thank you for the Sant'Elia. Ciao, ciao.